Hey, what's up, YouTube? This is EV Comics. Welcome to another beautiful day. Another day to review comics. I like reviewing comics, indie comics specifically, because that's where I want to put a spotlight on the scene. The good and the bad. The good-ing and the bad. And I want to talk about, you know what? Gooding! I got it. So, this is, I don't know if I'm one of the first people to get it or not. I really don't know. I haven't looked to see if anyone else has posted any reviews. But basically, Gooding has dropped. And guess what? They got the name right. They got the name right. It's Goddyng and not, hold on. It's humid today. It is humid today, and the plastic was sticking to the page. They spelled it wrong in ISOM 2. Which, I don't know, like that feels like something I could do, is miss something that obvious. So I won't hold it against them too much, but man, that's a bad typo to get wrong. You can get it wrong in small letters and people won't notice it too much, but if you get it wrong with the big title, whew, man, I have no idea how that got passed. Anyway, that's a funny mistake. What this is not a funny mistake. I would say that this comic is overall pretty good. I'm not gonna say it's my favorite. I think Alpha Core is still my favorite, and I'll talk about why. I'm gonna give you the good and bad. I have been anticipating this comic quite a bit because Mike Baron is on it. Mike Baron, comic legend. Look up his resume. He's done tons of stuff for a long time. The man is 75 years old and still writing, and in some cases it kind of looks like he's 75 years old. But we'll talk about what I mean by that in a second. So Gooding is a character that appeared in ISOM 2, which is the book I showed you earlier. This is ISOM 2. It's reversed, but you get the idea. ISOM 2, not the most focused book. You know, ever. It has, like, you know, a lot of scatterbrain stuff to it. It has like a lot of different plot elements that are just kind of there to be there because they need to be for world building's sake. And I felt like that was its flaw, but I'll talk more about ISOM 1 and 2 in a future video. I have one planned. But basically in that book, ISOM's ranch, his security shack is set on fire, and Gooding comes to the rescue. He puts out the fire with some kind of new technology and is able to do it within minutes. You know, he's talking about, you know, you pay me for stuff like this, for putting out fires, for helping with other kind of disasters, and also, you know, investigating why it happened and stuff like that. He's basically a jack of all trades person. And what's interesting is that, you know, he's offering these services for payment, right? In the trailer, he talks about, you know, in Shadow Valley, you know, he offers everyone protection for, you know, a certain amount of payment. It's not like he's a mafia boss. I'm saying it like he's a mafia boss, like, hey, give me some money and I'll make sure your shop is not destroyed, right? He's not that kind of guy. He's doing it out of the goodness of his heart, but clearly he, like, you know, he needs money to survive. And that's kind of how I sort of got the vibe off of him. A lot of people read that and thought that it meant that he's kind of a greedy guy. He's not really doing this out of the goodness of his heart. I think he is, but I think he also needs to make money. Now, what's interesting in this book, which I'll get to, is there's a little bit of a contradiction, and I'm not entirely sure if it's a contradiction, to be honest. It's a little confusing to me right now, but maybe on like a second read I will be able to find that out. This is my first, you know, review off of a first read, fresh off the read. It's only been about like 20 minutes for me to type up some bullet points and get this recording ready. But let's go ahead and get the art talked about. The art is excellent. It's very consistent all the way through. I think it looks pretty good. The environments look great. The characters look very consistent. Like throughout the entire book, I'm not guessing, is this character or is this that character? Like, I know Gooding is Gooding. I know Hodgins is Hodgins, and you know, even the side characters, I can tell them apart. And I think that's very good, and that's definitely a step up from the previous book, Yaira, which I thought the art was not consistent all the way through. Sometimes the art style looked like it would change a little bit, not much, but it would change just enough for me to notice. And people have all kinds of thoughts about the art of that book and who did it, but that's not for this video. I already talked about that. With Goodyng, the polymath, I think this book is more consistent art-wise than Yaira for sure. And again, the visuals are really good. I got cover A. I usually don't get the cover A's nowadays. I like to get like the more stylized or different covers, but this one is so good. This one goes so hard. I love this cover so much. I think this is probably, out of the comics I've got so far, this is easily my favorite. This is easily my favorite cover art that I've gotten. But you know, I'll compare it. I'll compare it real quick. And again, it is super humid where I live, so if stuff is sticking together, it's because the plastic is sticking together. But Yaira, not a bad cover. Not my favorite. ISOM 2, this is kind of a classic comic book cover. I like it, but still not my favorite. ISOM number 1, I got cover A. This one's a little busy, but I like it regardless. It's got the cool cross pattern that's also on his belt, which is still on his belt, by the way. Ethan Van Sciver said that ISOM lost the cross on his belt, and a bunch of people lost their mind. And you can clearly see it is on the artwork. Anyway, whatever. I thought that was ridiculous. And then you got, of course, Alpha Core. I got this cover. This one looks pretty cool because I like Galvin as a character. He's pretty cool looking. And I wanted to get a cover with him on it. And then, you know, you've got Goodyng, and then you've got this one. Oh, what is this? This is not a Rippaverse comic. This is Little Miss Steel. That's right. You can read this for free on Webtoon, Global Comics, and Tapas. God help you if you go to Tapas. But you can read it on all those sites for free. Go check it out. And then support me on Ko-Fi if you wish. I greatly appreciate it. But, you know, Goodyng, the cover art looks really, really good. So, getting back to the review, like I said, the art is excellent. The dialogue, mostly good. Sometimes it can feel a little off, and this is what I was talking about when I was saying it feels like Mike Barron is 75 years old, because sometimes the youngsters aren't talking like youngsters. You know, sometimes it just... You know, it's set in modern day times. People got smartphones. You know, people got all the modern day tech and everything. But sometimes there's some dialogue that doesn't feel modern. And I'm not going to hold that against him because he's a 75-year-old man. I'm sure there are some, you know, some editors involved that are tweaking some of it, which is why I probably didn't notice it as much. But... for sure, the dialogue is, for the most part, pretty good. The writing as well. There's some pretty clever writing. There's a moment where Gooding's bully, Hodgins, I forgot his first name, but his last name is Hodgins, and he's a bully. He's punching him in the gut multiple times in school, and just kind of, you know, Gooding's not really doing anything. He's not fighting back. And what Goodyng does is he makes a, like, sheet with thumbtacks on it and puts it under his shirt, so the next time Hodgins punches him in the gut, it messes up his hand. He's bleeding like crazy, and that goes to show that Goodyng is not a fighter necessarily as much as he is a thinker. Though he can fight, he's more of a thinker than that. But there's a clever writing moment where they're talking about, let me pull it up, they're talking about the metaphor, a word that means a metaphor. Let me pull it up real quick. He's like, the teacher is like, who knows what Potemkin means? Anyone listening? Goodyng. And then Goodyng gets up and says, sir, it's a metaphor that carries the ultimate purpose of providing an elaborate facade designed to hide an undesirable reality. We call that foreshadowing. And we also call that clever writing, because the dialogue in that scene is not wasted. You know, it's showing them in school, which you kind of have to do to establish, you know, where they're at in the timeline and whatnot, you know, what the location is and everything. But the dialogue is not wasted there. Dialogue is, you know, it's meaningful. And there's moments in, you know, Goodyng gives like a graduation speech, and you know, he talks about, you know, the discipline of desire. What do we do? What do we need in order to feel fulfilled? The discipline of action. How do we engage the world around us? The discipline of ascent. We can learn to love our lives as they. Can we learn to love our lives as they really are? And that's kind of reflective of Goodyng as a whole. You know, he's got discipline of action and drive, and that propels his character forward throughout the entire comic. And I think that's pretty clever. I think using a scene like, you know, just a graduation speech, or teaching about a metaphor, what this word means in the class, it's not wasted. It's dialogue that actually means something. Not just like, you know, just filler for the sake of being filler, which is hard to do. You know, I can't say that my writing is always like that. Sometimes I really do just be writing dialogue that just is there to fill the purpose. Because sometimes, you know, sometimes it's sort of necessary. But writing like this is a step above, because it basically is saying, like, it has a double meaning. It's there to add the immersion of being in a school setting, but also to kind of tell you where the story is going without being so direct. It's subtlety, and that's what I think is one of the Rippaverse's greatest strengths in writing overall, is subtlety. I'll talk about that more whenever I talk about ISOM, but I'm going to go back and talk about ISOM 1 and 2 at some point in the future. But to continue on, it is very fast-paced. That is something that you have to understand whenever you're reading this, is that this is going to be going lightning speed. And it's not Yaira fast-paced, where it feels like stuff is just happening all the time. It's a different kind of fast-pacing. What we have here is there's time skips. You start with Goodyng as a kid, and then you move on to high school, and then you move on to graduation, and then college, and then, you know, he's getting work because he's a brilliant mind. His ideas are getting him attention, getting him jobs. And then you fast forward to him and his girlfriend Gina. They get engaged, they get married. You know, they continue through life. He quits his job. He heads out on his own. And you know, there's a movie made about him because of some stuff he's invented. I think by the time, like, where we end off in the comic, he's probably in his early 30s or late 20s maybe. And just there's time skips on every, like, scene change, you know? It's not something that's like where ISOM is all set in, like, basically the same day almost, for ISOM 1. This, and I think it is set in one day now that I think back about it, this is set apart years, decades. And that forces the pace to be fast. And because this is a one-off comic, you kind of have to tell the entire story in one thing. At least the story focusing on Goodyng as the main character. Obviously, he's going to get more development in the future, and I'm curious to see where it goes. But in this book, it tells a story of how Goodyng, as a young, brilliant mind, works his way up, realizes that the deal he's currently in is not good. It's not good for not only just himself, but it's bad for his inventions, his ideas. And so he heads out on his own, he takes the risk, finds success. But there's another story going on, and that's where this gets really, the craft of storytelling is put on display here. That it's not just a Goodyng story. It's a story about his nemesis, the bully, Hodgins. The guy who punches him in the gut and then gets his hand messed up because he punches a bunch of thumbtacks. Well, that ended up getting him held back a year from school because he had to get, like, you know, he was in pretty rough shape. He had to get a tetanus shot. He had to get, like, a whole bunch of stuff because it messed up his hand, and it really messed him up. That guy ends up joining the military, and you know, him and his I guess is his friend who's in the military, or they become friends in the training. They do some you know, out of country ops and end up coming home with a bunch of illegal substances that they find from doing a raid. And essentially they get caught for it, they get thrown in court, they get thrown in jail, and then in jail there's this guy one of the guards who approaches them for a breakout. And from here it leads both of them to this sort of military ops, not military ops, but like secret what's the word I'm looking for? Secret plan, secret organization within a company called Procurement Incorporated, which kind of tells you, just the name of it is kind of obviously saying that like this company is not necessarily making a whole lot of stuff. They're kind of just like taking a bunch of ideas, and some of those ideas I believe are Gooding's. I think the company that Gooding was working for, which was what was it? What was the company? Let me fast forward a little bit. Is where he was in the building. I think the company that Gooding was working for and the Procurement Incorporated are the same thing. In my opinion, I have that theory. Madwire, that's what it is. I knew it started with an M. I think Madwire and Procurement Incorporated are the same thing. In my opinion, I think that's the case. I think they're just kind of a front for it. Because even like the guy who approached Gooding for his ideas and got him into the company in the first place seemed a little shady. Like, you know, the company is not really known for doing things that Gooding is building, but they get him anyway. And then later on, there's a line where Gooding says that Procurement Incorporated is a company for whatever you want them to be. And that's kind of similar to what Madwire was doing when they recruited him. So I kind of have the theory that they're the same thing. Can't confirm that or not, but it definitely feels like that might be the case. And one of such experiments that this company is doing, since they broke Hodgins and his friend out of jail, one of these experiments is working on the Hodgins, experimenting on him to basically, upon touch, he can make your heart race. He can make it to the point where you just die within seconds of him touching you. And that is a very terrifying power. It makes me think of the hand over his face guy from My Hero Academia. I can't remember his name. I cannot be bothered. But it makes me think of that, where he can just make you wither, right? This is different. Instead of withering, he's like making your heart race just by touching you, and then your heart explodes, essentially. You're bleeding out of like every hole in your face. And it's a very visceral scene whenever he's testing the powers out on first the dog. Now, it doesn't show anything too graphic, but just the idea of killing a dog is, you know, sad to me as a dog owner myself. But also, he kills a guy who basically leaked information. You know, he is essentially death. As soon as he touches you, he is death. And you see these two intersecting story. The comic starts with two kids in high school, one being a bully, one being a brilliant inventor that learns how to deal with bullies. And then as life continues, they continue to go in polar opposite directions, so much so that the bully ends up being a psychopathic murderer with superpowers and a flight suit. And Gooding ends up becoming one of the most brilliant inventors of all time, and still using his brain over brawn to outsmart his opponents, basically. And that doesn't mean just fighting opponents. That means business opponents. And what's cool is that these stories at first they diverge, and it doesn't seem like they're going to cross, and then it starts connecting. Hodgins is sent after, you know, multiple people that are connected to Gooding, and he starts killing them off for different discoveries and stuff like that they're making. Obviously, Procurement Incorporated and probably Madwire, let's be honest, are not happy with Gooding leaving Madwire and making more ideas. So they're trying to get rid of them. And it is two stories that begin at the same place, diverge, and then intersect once again in the modern time. And that's what I think is cool about this, is that it's very fast paced. Yes, there's not a whole lot of time to focus on the development of the characters necessarily, because things are going so quickly. There's so many time skips, but it does show the core of the character, which is, one is horrifically evil, one is like amazingly good. And what started with Gooding, I think, really starting to focus more on like helping people, is whenever Gina, his girlfriend at the time, brought him to her church community supper, like where they're giving free food to people. And Goodyng serves. You know, at first he kind of like laughs at the idea, but then he goes, and it's a kind of an eye-opening experience for him. There's a moment as well where they're in that kitchen. Let me see if I can find it real quick. This happens in college, yeah. And so they're having the supper, and it's like, you know, the guy used to work at Madwire and got laid off, you know, and that's just giving you a lot of hints. I think that Madwire and procurement are the same company, man. I'm telling you, that is my theory, and I'm sticking to it, unless I'm just flat out proven wrong. But yeah, so it's a good sort of foundation for him being a kid who cares is that moment whenever he sees the homeless people who are in need, who are hungry. It's a great little moment of humanity in a story that's so fast, and I'm glad that they didn't overlook that. That was something that I missed from Yaira, right? That was my biggest complaint with Yaira, is that she doesn't seem to care about humanity at all. Yeah, she's trying to prolong their life, but her actions as Yaira tell a different story. She's reckless and does not care about the people around her. And yes, that is her flaw, but it doesn't seem to be a meaningful move from the start of the book to the end of the book for Yaira's development in caring about people. Obviously, she cares about her descendant, who is developing ice powers like her, but she doesn't seem to care about people as a whole. It's only the people that matter to her. And you know, I don't think she would hold the door for an old lady walking into a store. I think she would just like walk in and just not care about her at all. That's what I'm getting at. But as for the rest of the book, there are a few issues, and here are my issues. Where is the salesman Goodyng from the trailer in ISOM 2? There's never a point where he seems to be like, I'm gonna do your fire protection and stuff like that. I'm gonna protect Shadow Valley for $50. $50 a month subscription plan. There's never a moment in that. In fact, at the end of the book, he's like, I'm going to protect you guys, no charge. Just speak into your phone and say, Goodyng firefighting services, and no charge. That is contradictory to what his character has been portrayed to so far, and not just in the trailer for this comic itself, but also in ISOM 2. In ISOM 2, he's talking about how Avery, which is ISOM, pays for the plan to protect him from fires and stuff like that. So, you know, in my question is that why isn't he doing that now? There's not really much focus on Shadow Valley, which the trailer kind of made me think there was going to be. Instead, it was like, it's the big city area, just like, I don't think it was Flora Spark. I think it was something else, but I can't remember the name of it, to be honest, off the top of my head. Maybe it was Flora Spark, but it didn't seem like it to me. It looked a little bit different visually. But the main point is what I'm getting at is that the trailer Goodyng and the ISOM 2 Goodyng seems to be a different Goodyng than the one in the book. Now, maybe this book takes place after ISOM 2, and he's had a change of heart, and now he's providing these services for free instead of charging people for it. Maybe this book was the sort of origin for him being able to ditch the payment idea, and instead focusing more on just helping people for the sake of helping. Maybe that was his big character development for this book. It's not entirely clear where this takes place. There's no mention of ISOM. There's no mention really of anyone except for one blink and you'll miss it moment at the beginning where it talks about Solari from Alpha Corps. But there's nothing saying that this takes place before or after ISOM 2. It's kind of up in the air. Now, if this takes place before ISOM 2, I have questions. Why is he saying that it's free in this book and then it's Not now he's charging a subscription fee for ISOM. Why is that the case? Or if this takes place after ISOM 2, I get it. It's a good character arc. And maybe it does. But as of right now, I really don't know. You know, that timeline setting is going to determine whether or not I think this is good or not. Because at this point of the story is good or not. Because, you know, that's either a character arc or a character contradiction. And one of those is bad. The next thing is Gina doesn't really do a whole lot other than show him, you know, the homeless people in need. There's not a whole lot that she does in the story as far as impacting it. She's just kind of there supporting her husband, boyfriend at the time, then husband, through this whole thing. There's never a moment where like she's in peril and he has to save her. There's never really a moment like that where I'm terribly concerned. And I think for her safety anyway. And I think, you know, you kind of want to avoid doing the damsel in distress because that's been done 1,000 times. People can find it boring. I don't find it boring, but some people can. And maybe that will happen in the future. Maybe Mike Barron is saving that for like another story with Goodyng in it. Maybe they do make a second Goodyng comic in the future if people want it that bad. That's why this book was made in the first place, by the way, was because fans wanted a Goodyng book. But besides that, going past Gina, the next thing I want to talk about is what is Goodyng's flaw? What is his weakness, his moral weakness, his emotional weakness, his physical weakness? What is it? Because as it is right now, he never fails with his inventions, no matter what it is. He's always right about, you know, what the inventions are going to do. His theories are always correct. There's never a moment where he struggles to prove himself really as an inventor. And he even wins every fight. You know, he gets punched at first, yeah, but then he has the thumbtacks under his shirt bit. And then in the climactic battle of the comic between Goodyng and Hodgins, it happens. It's over very quickly. It's over in a matter of like 4 pages. And he wins the fight very easily, might I add. Yeah, he takes 1 hit, but it's really not a struggle for him because the entire comic he's been winning at every invention that he's using all those inventions against Hodgins. And it's while the fight is cool, while the idea is cool that these characters reunite after all these years, one has become more good following the righteous path while the other has become more evil. And they intersect again. That's cool. The build-up is great and the moment is great, but the actual fight itself, it just kind of happens too quickly. I think this book is the shortest Rippaverse comic. I think it's like 70 something pages. They're not numbered, obviously, but it's, to me, I think this book could have used maybe 3 or 4 more pages of a fight scene. Maybe have a little bit more to it, and it would have felt more satisfying to me. As it is, like the concept of it and everything, the conflict at the end is good, but it's just too short for me. It doesn't have any sort of stakes to it whenever I see that it's over with in such a short amount of time. I really could have used a few more pages of action is what I'm saying at that final fight. And maybe a little bit more back and forth. Maybe have a moment where Hodgins grabs Goodyng and he's starting to accelerate his heart and starting to put some pressure on him. But then Goodyng has a last minute, like, you know, save or something. You know, maybe Gina comes in and does something to save him. And then Gina's put in peril. And then Goodyng beats Hodgins one last time and then knocks him out with a tranquilizer gun. You know, just stuff like that I think could have been just you know, they could have expanded the fight a little bit more, and it would have been a much better, more satisfying experience for me personally. Some people might find this fine, and that's totally fine if you do, but I think it's a little underwhelming to have the fight end that quickly. And yeah, the pacing was fast. This type of comic is going through years and years of life, so you kind of have to have the pacing be fast. Again, I don't think it was nearly as big of a problem in Yaira, where you never had a chance to breathe. Scenes changed without any kind of like context or anything. This had context. This told you, like, whenever a scene changed to like new locations, it would have a little info box up here saying, like, the location. It even had like the altitude, which was kind of cool. It felt very militaristic at times, which, the villain is anti-military, so it makes sense. And there was just more. I think I was more informed. There was never a moment where I was lost reading this. There was multiple moments in Yaira where I was like, wait, what? A lot of stuff that didn't make sense. Everything that happened in here made sense to me. The lightning striking the facility when the storm was coming in, that felt like a very chance thing to happen. But it was told that, hey, storm's coming in, and then during the raid, there's a lightning strike. It doesn't come out of nowhere, is what I'm saying. And even though it's technically a coincidence, it doesn't feel like it just comes out of nowhere, right? Splatterpuss. That's the name of Hodgins. I haven't been referring to that name this entire time because that is a terrible name. Why on God's green earth would you name your main antagonist Splatterpuss? How to make me not think of this guy as a threat 101. Name him Splatterpuss. Why? I don't get it. Yes, in the older times of DC and Marvel, there were some stupid villain and hero names. Yes, of course. Of course that's the case. But it doesn't mean we need to still do it now. It's like I was saying with the Superman thing. With Yaira, talking about her disguise being so bad that it would be blatantly obvious that she's Yaira to anyone who sees her for like 2 minutes. And people, people criticized that and said, oh, well, what about Superman? Superman, he's just basically the same guy, but with glasses. Wouldn't people notice that? And like, yeah, I think that's the case too. And the excuse is that Superman is a much older property. It was made in a simpler time. And we are not in that simpler time anymore. We have moved past that. So whenever I see a 7-foot-tall blonde woman who's super buff with a gifted chest walk into a room in a city where a 7-foot-tall blonde woman with huge muscles and huge breasts is wanted, it's kind of obvious who she is. So, and the same thing could go for Superman, right? Minus the breast. And it just, I think because Superman is old, it's kind of just accepted that that's a thing. This is not old. This is new. And that was my biggest complaint about, one of my biggest complaints about Yaira. The sense of it didn't make sense. This book makes sense. Goodyng makes sense. And I think the story, start to finish, is very, pretty well put together. Of course, it's fast, but again, you kind of have to be when you're telling a story like this. And I think Mike Barron did a pretty good job of it. I thought the art was great, like I said earlier. The story was pretty good. I just wish that Goodyng had more of a flaw, more of something to fight against, other than a personal battle to fight against, other than the company he formerly worked at owning his ideas. I think there could have been a bit more of a personal struggle for him in this book that would have made his character a bit more compelling. As it is, the guy just seems kind of flawless, which is something I complain about with Yaira, was that she was basically flawless, and the story treated her as such. Maybe there could have been a moment where Goodyng got kind of a big head. Maybe there was something where he had a relationship problem with his wife because he was getting a little bit too arrogant, a little bit too full of himself. And maybe that causes the relationship to crash or something. And then he has to win her back by, proving that he's a changed man. Just stuff like that would have been nice to have. Anything of the sort, some kind of personal conflict, I think would have made this comic much better. But as it is, I don't think it's a bad comic at all. and it's cheap. It's $18, which is the cheapest Rippaverse comic so far. People are, you know, looking at the sales and saying, "Oh, it didn't crack a million." Well, yeah, duh. It's $18. And they're not selling as much merchandise with it. They're not doing the signed copies like they did as well. It's 4 covers, and that's it basically. There's no merchandise with it. There's nothing. So the campaign, which this is not a campaign, by the way. This is they're doing a new format on their website. You know, to compare it to a campaign where there's lots of stuff launched with it, including signed copies that go for a pricier penny. It's not a fair comparison. And while it is, of course, less than $1 million in earnings currently, maybe that changes. I don't know. That'd be crazy. While it's not, you know, above $1 million, it is still multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars earned from a comic book. That's freaking great. And people don't seem to understand that, I think. People who are, you know, calling it out as a failure because it didn't crack $1 million, they're not understanding the math. And Goodyng will be very disappointed in you. But yeah, overall, I like the character of Hodgins. I hate the name. I like the character of Goodyng. I just wanted him to be a little more flawed. And I like the story. If a little fast, I do like the story, and I like how it intersects. The writing is clever. Like I said, the writing is pretty clever. There's some good usage of you know, just normal everyday dialogue, like a graduation speech or a class presentation from a teacher. There's good use of it. This comic is not a waste of time. And speaking of wasting time, I will no longer waste yours with more words. So what did you think of Goodyng if you've read it? Leave a comment down below. I'd love to discuss and defend my opinion. And if need be, change my opinion. If you can prove me wrong, you know, I'm not going to be against it. I need to hear a good argument, but, you know, just talk about it. I would love to discuss it. But thanks so much for watching. I'll continue to give honest reviews of every comic I read. And as long as you guys keep enjoying it, I'm going to keep making it. So thanks so much for watching. Until next time. Peace out. Oh, and read Little Miss Steel for free on Webtoon, Tapas, and Global Comics. You can check it out. The links will be in the description and the pinned comments. So, thanks so much for watching. Till next time. Peace out.